In this video, I'll be sharing with you a requested tutorial from my group on how to cut this stylish corset with an inner lacing. So to start, I'm going to go ahead to mark out my basic measurements, which I have already done. Now I marked my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, my shoulder to waistline, and my blouse length. My shoulder to bust is 9 inches, my shoulder to under bust is 12 inches, my shoulder to waist is 17, and then my blouse length I added additional 5 inches to that point. I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2 at this point, and from there I'll come down by 1 inch. After marking this, I'll go ahead to mark a basic neckline of 3 inches, and I'll go ahead to connect. So after I'm done connecting, I'm going to go ahead to find the chest line, which is the bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I'll draw a straight line. Now after marking that, I'll go back and mark my shoulder divided by 2 plus half. For the measurement I have on the shoulder, I'll mark it on the chest line, place my ruler, and I'll connect. Now after I'm done connecting, I'll go ahead to divide my shoulder into 2 equal parts, come out by ½ inch at this point. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So I'll go ahead to connect from the midpoint to the upper part, and from that point all the way to the bust circumference divided by 4. Now after I'm done marking that, I'll just go ahead to mark my dart intake for this pattern. I'll go ahead to mark a basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches, which I'll use as a guide, and I will connect. So after I'm done connecting, I'm going to start by taking my dart intake for this pattern, right? So I'll just go ahead and mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5, and I'll go ahead to place this to connect all the way from the upper part to the lower part of my pattern. Now after I'm done connecting, I'll divide my shoulder into 2 equal parts and connect. Now I'm going to place my ruler, and I'm going to connect all the way up. After I'm done connecting at this point, I'll go ahead to mark my dart intake. Now for my under bust tightening, I'll be using 1 inch on both sides. If you're plus size, go ahead to use 1.5 inches on both sides of your pattern. So I want to have like a slant style line at this point, just like we have at the dress. I'll come out like 2 inches. At the lower part, at the waist, I'll just mark where I have that point, and I'll go ahead to connect. So while recording, my camera stopped and I didn't notice that. So I'm just going to explain what I did. So what I did here was, after marking my dart intake of 1 inch here and the other side, right, I marked 2 inches here. So after marking these 2 inches, I connected from my under bust to that 2 inches at the lower part with my marker. Now after doing that, since I have a dart intake of 1 inch on both sides, which is 2 inches, so what I did was, from this point I measured 2 inches and I marked. Now at the lower part also I measured 2 inches and marked, because my normal dart tightening is just 1 inch on both sides. So if your own is 1.5, you measure 2 inches, and sorry, if your own is 3 inches, you go ahead to measure the 3 inches and mark. That is for a busty person or someone that has bust. Now from this part of my pattern, now I'm just going to go ahead, place my tape from the shoulder, and I'll mark -5 inches. That is where I want the neckline of this dress to start from. So if you're using -4, it is still okay. So after marking this, for my dart intake, I'll just mark 0.25. That is the tightening at the over bust. I'll mark 0.75, sorry, at both sides of my pattern, right? You don't want to have much gaping at this point of your pattern, and I'll connect this and also connect this at the other side of my pattern. Now this is what I have, and I'll go ahead to outline. Now let's go ahead to insert my measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Now this that I have here, that is what I'll be replacing at the side of my pattern. Now I'll add my sewing allowance. Here I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake I have here, replace and add half inch for my sewing allowance. Now for the waistline, my waist is 28 inches and I want to snatch out 2 inches. So that 28, I'll minus 2 inches from it, giving me 26. I'll divide that 26 by 4 and mark. And I'll go ahead to measure this dart intake, replace, and then add just half inch for the sewing allowance. Now at the blouse length, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4. Then I'll just measure this dart intake, replace at this point, and add my sewing allowance. After I'm done marking this, I'll just go ahead to connect my pattern, starting from the bust to the under bust to the waist, and from the waist all the way to the blouse length. Now after I'm done marking at this point, I'll just readjust it because I noticed that I marked more than the the hip point, and I'll outline. Next step is to mark the bust dart, and to get your bust dart is the difference between your shoulder to waist in front and your shoulder to waist at the back, and I'll just go ahead to outline this pattern. So this is what I have here. Now let's work on the neckline. I'll go ahead to blend this up. After blending this part of my pattern, make sure it's meeting. I'll now go ahead to draw out the neckline. So for the neckline, I'm just going to use my free hand to draw out the design of the neckline I want there, and I will connect, go ahead to use my marker to outline. So after I'm done outlining, I'm going to come up by 2 inches from this point, and I'm going to go ahead to connect this to the lower part of my pattern. I'll go ahead to blend this out, right? So after blending out, I'll go ahead to connect from that 2 inches I went up all the way to the lower part of my pattern this way. So this is what I have, and we are done drafting. So what you do is to go ahead to take your boning, then wrap it with your corset mesh to create the boning lines on the corset pattern. Now after cutting this, you notice that at the under bust, starting from the under bust, there's an under bust corset which you're going to draft out from it. But first, I'll go ahead to cut this out. Now place this on your pattern, and you're going to transfer your measurement, then go up by half inch and go ahead to connect for this part. Now you have to place this and draft out the front pattern, then before going ahead to cut out these parts, and this is what you now use to trace out that part from the under bust all the way to the upper part of the pattern. Next, we are going to go ahead to work on the back pattern. So for the back, I've gone ahead to mark out the zipper allowance, and I also marked my shoulder divided by 2. I found my chest line just the same way we did for the front pattern. So I'll go ahead to label my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to waist, and I added additional 5 inches after the waistline. Next, I'll go ahead to start marking the darts, which I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, place my ruler, and I'm going to go ahead to connect this all the way up. After I'm done connecting, I'm just going to go ahead, mark half inch on both sides of my pattern. Now I'll come down by 1 inch, and I'll connect from the half inch at the waist all the way to the upper part of the pattern, and I'll be repeating the same thing, connecting from that point all the way to the blouse length. So after I'm done marking this, I'll outline, and it's time to insert our measurements. I'll go ahead to insert my bust circumference divided by 4, then I'll add my sewing allowance. That waistline we used, that we snatched, that's what you mark, and then measure the dart intake, replace, and add half inch for your sewing allowance. So I'll go ahead to mark the hip circumference divided by 4 and add half inch for my sewing allowance. Now I'll connect from this point all the way to the upper part, and from the waistline I'll connect to the blouse length of the pattern. Now this is what I have after I'm done marking. I'll go up by 2 inches just like we did for that of the front pattern. Then I'll go ahead to place my ruler to connect. Please sorry for the background noise in this video. After that, I'll just go ahead to outline my pattern, and we're going to work on the upper part. So I'll just place my tape and mark -5 just like we did for that of the front. I'll come down by ½ inch here and I'll go ahead to connect this going all the way to the upper part of this pattern. Now this is what I have here. I went ahead to outline. Now I'll mark ½ inch here and I'll extend this all the way to the lower part. Repeat this to the upper part. So we are taking out the zipper bulge. Now I want to tighten this part of my pattern. I'll mark 0.25 at both sides and slant it. This is so that I will not have gaping at the upper part of my dress, right? And I'll cut this out. If you have any question regarding this pattern drafting, please kindly go ahead to leave your question and I'll go ahead to cut it out, and then also cut out the dart area and the zipper bulge of this pattern, right? So after cutting that, cut out the zipper bulge, but I forgot to cut it out in this video, so just go ahead to cut out yours. Now this is the inner lacing that we are trying to draft. So I've marked out all the initial measurements just like we have for that of the back pattern, which is the shoulder to bust, shoulder to waist, an additional 5 inches after the waistline. I'll be marking it in form of a dartless pattern because you don't want to go through the stress of cutting and recutting. Mark your bust circumference divided by 4, add ½ inch. Now that snatched waistline that we used for the front pattern, mark it here. Then all you have is to mark is ½ inch by the side of the waistline. Now after marking that, I'm going to go ahead to mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and add ½ inch. Now go ahead to place your marker to connect this. So after you're done connecting at this point of your pattern, I'll go ahead and come up by 2.5 inches. This pattern, this one is actually meant to be shorter because you're going to be attaching it in between the main corset dress. So now let's go ahead to mark out the lacing area. I will use like 2 inches, so you can also use 1.5. This totally depends on what you want to use, right? And I'll go ahead to connect at this point. Make a dot to indicate that I have a lacing at this part of my pattern, and I'll go ahead to cut this out. So now what I'm going to do is to cut out my sleeve. So I've marked my shoulder to elbow and my sleeve length. Next, I'm going to mark -5 inches. Remember, our dress is like 5 inches off the shoulder, and I'll mark. That same -5 we came down from, I'll mark -5. Remember, then you now add like ½ inch for the joining allowance of your sleeve. So after marking this, I'm just going to come down by 4 inches, right? So I want to like mark out the armhole of the off shoulder. So you can come down from 4 inches or 5 inches from where your starting line is for the off shoulder sleeve. So go ahead to measure the round bicep of your hand. Mine is 15 inches divided by 2 is 7.5. I'll mark and add extra ½ inch for joining allowance. So I'm working with a mesh and I don't need much sewing allowance. Now go ahead and connect, drawing my armhole curve for the off shoulder sleeve. Elbow, measure your round elbow measurement and then add ½ inch. So I'm cutting this for a mesh, so you don't need much sewing allowance. Go ahead and measure around your wrist and mark, then add ½ inch for that too. So I'll just go ahead and I will connect this to this point and then take it all the way to the lower part of my sleeve, and I will blend here out. So I'll just go ahead and I will cut this out, but before cutting out, I'll just go ahead and blend here out a bit. So I had to go ahead to take my measurement round again because I felt that was big. Then after measuring it, I added ½ inch and I'll go ahead to reconnect. So after reconnecting, this is what I have, and I'll go ahead to cut out my pattern. After cutting it, you'll be adding this, you'll be joining it to the corset pattern, and this is what I have. I'll just trim out here a little.